is this. Is our response, you read a whole list of potential responses to racism. Is our response going to be the same to racism from the outside of our African American race versus the racism that we create amongst ourselves? The self-imposed racism, the racism that the African American race has created. And you and I spoke a drop or two about it in the group.
You sure did, young lady.
But there is an abundance of racism within our race, and I don't see how we can go outside and fix and declare and give responses until we clean up the inside of our house. So my question is the response to racism different when the racism is imposed by us or by him?
Well, young lady, I don't, and I will elaborate on that a little in about 10 minutes.
And I appreciate the young lady too.
Well, that's a relative term. You know? Well, I could be 1 year younger than Moses, you know. But, see, I don't see any discernible difference. You know, blacks living in the United States were tied sociologically, psychologically, to a great degree to whites at the hip. See? And of course, we know in Anthropology 101 that if you raise a child with giraffes, okay? If you raise a child with giraffes, he survives for a year, the child. It is questionable whether he'll walk. We know definitely he will not talk. But after about 6 months, he will begin to mimic the characteristics of the giraffe. Being on the top of trees, the human being is unique in that respect. In other words, we become a part of the culture in which we are immersed. See, this is what Smith was talking about when he talked about the internalization of racism. See? I mean, you just conducted cursory, unscientific experiment. Just ask any black child what was Washington's first name. They're going to tell you George, but then why not Booker T? In other words, our perceptions are no different from that of the European. Okay? In a situation where you have the power dynamics, European American people, European extraction here, African Americans on the bottom, we have a paternalistic relationship, parent-child, dependency. We are a dominated people, a dependent people. See? The European is the progenitor of our thought. We are the progeny. That's your father, your son, the black self-hatred, that's your unholy spirit. Because ultimately, it is the psycho-spiritual father whose behavior is actualized in the child. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, and see, we have to take this into consideration if we are to deal with issues such as the psychodynamics of black-on-black crime. There are other tangible factors as well. But to answer your question, you know, the condemnation has to come inside as well as outside. The European brother, okay, you're displaying white supremacy. African brother, you've internalized white supremacy. You know, and then you just leave it alone. Wipe the dust off your feet. Yes, sir.
Anthony wants to chime in and then Ron.
Okay.
I think there has to be a conversation to add on what Brother Russell was saying about how to heal the effects from within the black community, right? I think how that looks may be slightly different than it looks to address the outside, right? I think it has to look different because of the history. And also to recognize the fact that individuals, to one degree, are different in the way they've internalized that. You have some individuals, right, who have a strong sense of self, right? And you have some individuals who have a sense of self that may be impacted by the internalization of that storyline, that racist storyline. So I would say that how that healing process looks might be different within our community, which is like going back to our history, going back to our roots, And I'm reminded, as when you ask that question, I'm a preacher, so forgive me. There's a passage in the Gospels when Jesus encounters a man who's demon possessed. His name is Legion, right? And when Jesus jumps off the boat, the guy runs up to him. And the curious thing about that story, if you ever get a chance to read this in the Gospel of Mark, the first thing that Jesus does is he asks him, he says, "What is your name?" And so he begins this process of exorcising or relieving this human of the effects of oppression. Because he says, what is his name? Y'all remember what he said his name was? Legion, right? He was naming the oppression that was going on inside of him.
The Gadarenes.
Right, the Gadarenes. So if you remember the story in the Gospel, Legion actually cuts himself, bodily harms himself. He's actually acting upon his body what the larger society was acting upon him. Right? And so within our communities, we have to talk about that. Be specific in naming those ways in which within ourselves we do damage to ourselves and to each other. Light skin, dark skin, right? So-called good hair versus so-called bad hair, right? And even then you get into gender oppression, the way we were taught to oppress our women, right? And so I think the healing looks different when we deal outside and deal with systems and structures within ourselves. Does that help? Does that make sense?
No, I'm really just going to. Yes, sir.
I just want to make a point on where some of that stuff could come from, because I heard and understood your question. A lot of times I'm working on myself and accepting that I am dark skinned, that I do have big lips, that I do have kinky hair. But I have to realize where it started. It didn't start with me. It started way before me, and a lot of it has to do with publicity. The first image of a beautiful woman that I saw on TV was Marilyn Monroe. You know, so being a little black girl seeing this image, I don't look like this. So I'm going to put a mole on my face. I'm going to cut my hair and dye it blonde. And that's going to make me more than who I am. And actually, I got my first boyfriend when I did that. So imagine what kind of psychosomatic trauma it did to my own self to believe that I had to have straight hair. I had to have the features of a Caucasian woman in order to be attractive to my own black king men. And so you have to start dealing with that personally. That's a personal battle that you have to work on and say, listen, if I do believe in church and I do believe in the Bible says that Jesus had hair like wool. And I'm the only person on this earth that has hair like wool, or my people. And so then it says that he had burnished copper or burnished bronze skin. Well, I'm the only person, my people, that fit that description. So now I need to take pride in that. It's a personal thing, I do.
Let me bring it back a little bit, because I want to make sure, Dr. Swing, got your point. And, Anthony and people in the chamber know, I have a little bit different take in kind of in line with what Dr. Swing. I don't believe in blind belief. And just because it's black doesn't mean it's right. If it's screwed up, we need to expose it as being screwed up. Thurgood Marshall said a snake is a snake, whether it's black or white. And we need to start exposing these idiot black folks that are so-called leaders too.
It's hard to get us to group up though.
But going back to Dr. Swain's question, I see what you're saying in the sense that, and I think he answered it, we can't mirror the behavior and exhibit the behavior and then criticize other people for criticizing the behavior. And I think where it comes from is we got to start with these young people. Too. And that's our biggest problem. We got to start instilling some value into these young folks. But go ahead, Brother Swilley.
Yeah, but, a few points, I'm seriously ADD. They didn't know how to deal with me in the 60s. So I got kicked out of class a lot, okay? But every maladjustment in the African-American personality serves a social, political, economic purpose for the benefit of Europeans. See? Revlon has boasted they spend anywhere from $180,000 to $500,000 a month just in the psychology of black people and black skin. Because they know they're going to get their money back. You know, suffice it to say, see, the white supremacist dynamic is real. Okay? The white supremacist bombardment, it denigrates black beauty, black intelligence, black capacity, black history. Young lady.
My cue was the Gadarenes, when Anthony was talking about the Gadarenes, but I would say the worship of complexion started when people were enslaved, and the people who were inside the homes were the children, in a lot of cases, of the person who was considered the master of the whole plantation. His children received preference, and they were usually of a lighter hue because they were half white. And that's kind of where it all started. So the preference for skin color, hair, came from seeing the favor of those people, the favor of those children of that person that we call the master. But that's oppression. That's still a level of oppression. It's still it's stemmed out on probably not even on purpose to kind of influence us to believe that white skin was better. But that's how it has transitioned, and that's what having those children and us watching them receive favor has kind of infiltrated into. But we have a system of oppression. We are still seen as the Gadarenes. When a black man walks into the room, he is seen as that man from the Gadarenes who comes out to Jesus wild and crazy, that the community has tried to put handcuffs on to hold down. They've tried to keep him in not feed him. They tried everything to keep him from tearing up the community, and nothing stops this man from tearing up the community. Africans in this country are viewed in that way. They're seen as, from the eyes of whites, as the man of the Gadarenes. And what we have to understand is, when you look internally, you are the people that were forced as captives into this country, African Americans, forced as captives, not slaves, but captives, and arrived here, taught everyone how to build toilets, taught everybody here how to build plumbing, how to use electricity, how to light up a bulb so that it lasts for more than 2 days. So understand that you came here as captives, but we are all here as Americans and have contributed the exact same, and African Americans probably more than most of Americans here. And you are more American than, I would say, neck and neck with the Native Americans if we had to judge on who has contributed the most, who has suffered the most to make this nation what it is today. So I want everyone to know that we are not the Gadarenes, and we are the ones who go from land to land as slaves, civilizing folks to love one another. We teach people how to love other people, how to walk in peace together without firing a gun back. You don't find many Africans shooting anybody else but each other. That's a sad thing to say, but you rarely find that. The crime that Africans commit in every nation is to each other. That's an issue that we really have to face.
Okay, we're going to go ahead. I don't want to cut you.
Okay,
We
but
on
just
time
wanted to...
scale.
Okay, brother, there probably needs to be a part two, but let me say this. It's ultimately what we're talking about is power. See, it's not about loving each other, it's all about power. Power is the ability to define reality and to have the victims of that definition accept it as if it were their own definition. See, we're suffering from powerlessness. Well, we've been taught that to pursue power is sinful, or that it's an evil thing.
Wow.
See, and if power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, then powerlessness corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. And if you look at the problems, the host of problems in the African community today, okay, They stem from no other source than powerlessness, corrupting an entire culture and bringing terror into many of these communities. So you look at the types of crimes that are committed by groups who do not have relative control of resources versus those groups who do. See? You know, suffice it to say that every value has to be supported by an economic system. Or else a child's going to rationalize these values ain't doing a goddamn thing for me. I may as well acquire a different set of values. See? So we're still talking about power. See? If we are not being educated in the acquisition of the utilization of power, then we're being miseducated. Because ultimately you start with the question, what is your major problem in the world? And it's power. You know, game, set, match. See? This is simply the power to define, the power to create jobs and give these youngsters some alternatives to the mugging and whatever they're doing here in Salisbury, Nigeria, Nairobi, Tampa, Tallahassee, wherever you go. The African situation is worldwide. See, the same politics that adheres in Salisbury, the same politics that adhere in Nairobi, and in Ghana and everywhere else. See, I can just substitute the name, Salisbury, Nairobi, Kenya, you know, Mogadishu, wherever. You know, it is the same relative situation. See? The power versus the powerless. How much time? Oh, you good. I'll cut you off. Okay. Okay, so look at it a little deeper, guys. You know, I'm telling you, this needs to be a part two. See, there is a lot of territory that we need to cover. We're talking about history, economics, science, education. You know, and driving back here from the Osceola River down in Florida, the more questions I answered, the more questions that were begat. You know, questions, answers, more questions. The ramifications of this answer, you know, it can almost overwhelm you. But see, as an addendum to what this sister said, Constance and my sister here, Rankin, the young ladies, we find even in the language affects who we are, or how we think. How we think has a direct effect as to who we are. What is it to be Jude? What is it to be gypped? 120 synonyms that refer to blackness, all negative. See? Yellow has a connotation. Cowardly. Those sneaky Japs. See? I'm just freelancing here. You know, speaking of Americanism and American exceptionalism, we're on the verge of embarking on the holiest of days, the 4th of July. And I'm sure when you hear Lenny Greenwood's song, I'm born to be American and at least I know I'm free, stand up, yada, yada, yada. Okay, ad nauseum. See? Next time you hear a white or black person on the 4th of July and you observe tears in their eyes, why don't you just tell them the thing with the British happened over 200 years ago? You know I'm going with it. Forget about it. The fact of the matter is Americans love living in the past. Remember Pearl Harbor. Remember the Alamo. See? Forget about slavery. Not the Holocaust, the Black Holocaust, and I don't want to minimize anybody's suffering, but the Ma'afi of the Manganese, the destruction of library cities and towns, and the human possibility that could have arrived if Africa had not been penetrated by imperialism, racism, and economic exploitation. Because if you're really serious, as this sister pointed out, about your innate capabilities, you have to ask yourself, what new cures for diseases might they have discovered that this tragedy not occurred? And the world suffered because of this. This is not only a loss to black people, this is a loss to humanity. Okay? 1 minute. In my conclusion, learned growing up in Florida in the 70s that the tools of conquest are not necessarily bombs, explosions, and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, myths, and superstitions that exist only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudice can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened, frantic search for a scapegoat can have a fallout all of its own. For children, and for children who are yet unborn. The pity of this is, these issues are rarely dealt with in the house of the Lord. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brother Swilley. And like I said, I've always enjoyed and I've learned a lot from Brother Swilley. What I want to do in the next 10 minutes, we're going to try to wrap up, keep this to just 2 hours. We went a little bit long last month. But what I want to do is give everybody the opportunity, if it's something that you want to share, if it's a personal story, and we don't need a history lesson or going back to when you were in kindergarten kind of thing, because we only have a few minutes. But I want to give Brother Anthony the chance if he wants to wrap anything up, sum anything up. If not, we can let you stand what Brother Swilley said. But I just wanted you as facilitator, see if there's anything you wanted to close out with.
I would just say this, is that this kind of conversation today is sort of like first steps. It's like a beginning thing. Like Brother Swilley said, this really requires other parts to this kind of conversation. But to be honest with you, you're not going to find a conversation like this anywhere. And I really say this with absolute certainty. Anywhere in this community. And that's a lot to be said by the history of this place. And so drink it in. If you were offended today, good. That means you're beginning your journey, right? So wherever you are in this process, continue to ask questions, disagree, debate, dialogue with others. Look at the history of this place. Begin to find those elders that have began this journey themselves.
Thank you. Before I open it up, I just listening to Brother Swilley just had me write down a few thoughts. And again, I'm just really appreciative of you. But one of the things I wrote down when you were talking was I think it's important in line with what Anthony said as well. If you don't culturally understand someone or a group, you don't care about that group. You can do all the fake fawning and we shall overcome and swing and all that crap songs, but if you don't really understand or take the time to understand a person, you can't care for that person. I've worked in healthcare for 20 years now, and I was telling Chris and some of the other people about the swing. There are a lot of situations where I have been either the only black or one of a few blacks in the room. And I don't think whites will ever understand that sense of isolation that you feel, because you got to put up with the nigger jokes and you got to put up with, oh, we're just glad you're not like them people, or you don't sound black, or you don't act black. And if that's somebody's comfort level, it's not mine. So I'm just kind of past here on that crap. Too. So when Dr. Swain talked about, the internal, and Brother Swilley talked about kids, my thing is, and it's what Dr. Kunjufu said, if you teach a child that his history started on a slave ship, this is what you're going to get. But if you teach a child that their history started well beyond a slave ship, it's limitless of what we can do. So what we have to do is grab these young people and really change that mindset. We can have a war on everything from poverty, drugs, terror, to whatever. But until we start instilling some value in these young kids and let these young kids quit having kids, we're not going to do anything else to that. And then the last thing I want to say is, I don't believe in giving the keys to my community away. We have to control the politics. Now, I don't mind sitting down at the table with anybody of any hue, of any political stature, but I'm not going to let you come in and take the keys to my community and run my community in the ground like they're allowing the West End to do. And I've asked this question before. Think about the city of Salisbury. Take away your staple businesses. Take away your funeral homes, your barber shops, your beauty shops. What do black folks own in this town?
Not a damn thing.
And we gotta do better than that. We have to become business owners, we have to become property owners, and we have to quit begging people for what needs to be done. How many people do we have on the county commission? None. How many people do we have on city council? And I'll be honest, none. And so we gotta do a whole lot better than what we're doing.
I got one more story, and this is my charge to the white brothers and sisters. 40 years ago, my team, Rambunctious High School team, we practiced illegally, in a place called Black Mountain, North Carolina. And this is a scene eerily similar to the scene you saw in Remember the Titans, okay? They went away, and then they had to face the social reality of going back to Florida. But we had an opportunity to bond with some of our white teammates, and we did. Now, just taking into consideration the time period, there were deep divisions in society. If you saw Remember the Titans, as a high schooler, we knew from rumor that a group of whites would tell racist jokes. This is the first year of school. And make racist comments as if it was perfectly acceptable to do so. And if no one in the group would mind, we call this white bonding. Whites do it amongst themselves, rescuing them from home. Okay? I asked a white teammate of mine, Rick, you'll catch him on my Facebook every now and then, to immerse himself in the group, and the next time the racist group leader, that was Russell Swilley, told a nigger joke, that Rick, this is my white friend, should tell the racist group leader that his mother was black, meaning that Rick's mother was black. Now you have to take into consideration, see that blacks come in all hues from ink to pink, right? Okay, and there are a lot of African Americans who look white. Rick said that he would comply. Now he was very similar to Sunshine in Remember the Titans, if you saw that movie. A cool white boy, so to speak. Okay, Rick said he would comply. Invariably, the racist comments spewed, and on cue, Rick told the jokester that his mother was black. The jokester responded, "Oh my God, I didn't know." Rick paused, went along with the game. He admitted that he was not black, he was as white as they were. It explained, "You must think all whites are racist and enjoy racist jokes. Otherwise, you wouldn't take a chance making that kind of comment around white folk you don't even know." See? Why do you think so little of white people risk tax? Rick had created self-awareness and doubt in the mind of the jokester. Okay? When Rick was asked, "Why are you doing this? Are you doing this and acting paternalistically for your black football buddies?" Rick responded by saying, "No, I'm doing this for myself." See? In the final analysis, it is incumbent upon African Americans, the victims of racism, to illuminate these issues. Okay? It is incumbent upon whites to do what they have admonished blacks to do all along, and that is to take responsibility. See? Suffice it to say, ending racism is a two-way street, a 200% process. See? And there needs to be a national initiative. When I was a little boy, John Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon in 9 years, 10 years. He did it in 9. There need to be a national movement to end racism.
Anybody want to, respond? Yes, ma'am, Dr.
I'd just like to chime in. First, about what you said about educating the young people, whoever made that comment. As an educator, of course, I definitely think that's a step in the right direction. But I also think that it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we're educated. And two things that you can look up online to get some more information about. One is the concept called the Browning of America. And it's the idea that in not too many years, the majority of the folks in America will be minorities, if that makes any sense. And it's also the idea that there are lots of brown people in the world. It's not just about blacks or African Americans. And in saying that, you made the comment about looking like Jesus, but there are a lot of people in the world with kinky hair and brown skin. And it goes way beyond the borders of the United States.
Right.
And then the other thing is, if you Google TED Talk and a single story, there's an African young lady who did a phenomenal TED Talk that talks about the dangers of looking at things through a single story. And the idea of it is that it's very easy to have that narrow focus based on your experiences, how you were brought up, and your background. But there's so much more to the world than just that. So while it's important that we look at our local issues and work on our local issues, we also have to have a global mindset, because our kids are going to have to function in a global society.
You know, to that, brother, it appears to me, 2 point, keep this in my house because I lose my train of thought. Many of your Asians, okay, and Hispanics, they realize they can become a part of the white supremacist order by accepting those assumptions. You know, for those who try to exonerate George Zimmerman for not being a racist. Okay, and this sister alluded to one narrative. Black like me used to be required reading when I was at Shaw Elementary School growing up down south. And it chronicles the experience of a white man, Griffith, who took a pill and turned himself black into it and gut bucket Jim Crow South. See? But the problem is, he could have asked my daddy. You know, instead of going through all that hassle. But see, here again, we're talking about one narrative that's accepted. See? Americanism. American exceptionalism. See, and the danger of color blindness, and we didn't get to it, it needs to be a part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, ad infinitum, is that it eliminates other narratives. See? The problem with genocide is that it destroys a competing ethic. See? There was no such thing as privatization with the indigenous people. I did not say Indians. I almost got my head taken off on a reservation in Colorado when I was young. See? And so instead of the query post 9/11, well, hey, that's because of our freedoms. Well, boom, you fill in the blank. See, all you got to do is just ask any conscious African, and he could have told you why this occurred. See, so whose voice is being left out? Whose voice needs to be included? See, and I'm going to take my ignorance on whatever topic, okay, as a starting point and not a dead end. See, I don't know and I don't give a shit. See, attitude, you know, white folk and Negroes are blinded by their blind spots. See? Gut bucket, Jim Crow, Bull Connor, police dogs. The vast majority of whites felt like blacks had acquired equity. Well, then why the Samuel they sicking the dogs on the brothers down here in Birmingham, Alabama? Oh, they must have stolen some steaks and put them underneath their garments. See, that was the rationale that was given as to why the dogs were attacking these people in Alabama at this time. 50% of whites said they don't care if blacks arrive at a point of equity or not. This is in the 90s. See? But now that's not the problem. The problem is Letitia, Ray, Jamal, and Baybrook sagging. That's the big issue. You know, Wall Street executives stole so much money you can stack dollar bills to the sun and back twice and then some. See? That's your big issue right there. What if the Wall Street manipulators had been black? Or these people out in Idaho on a ranch who pointed guns at federal agents, what if they'd been black? See? I don't want to minimize anybody's suffering, but there's a great deal of curricula devoted to the Jewish Holocaust, to the destruction of European Jewry. Nothing about the transatlantic slave trade or the sub-Saharan slave trade. You guys should just forget about it. Well, forget about it. That's right. You know, forget about 4th of July.
And that's why, I mean, that's why.
Everybody's heard of Anne Frank.
I call it his story, not his. His story. Go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is go ahead and wrap up, but just things are not as different or evolved
as you would like them to be. And I would go back to, and I don't know if people have lived here long enough to remember this. I know Brother Sharp might remember this incident because I wrote about it in that paper we have. But in 91, 92, as Brother Swilley said, they brought the fire department out and sprayed some kids up on Fisher Street. And I remember asking, it was Chief Jacobs at the time, and asking them, is this 1952 or 1992? How are you gonna bring water hoses out and spray children? But the biggest problem was there was nothing for children to do in Salisbury. But you had a difference. You had, when the mall was thriving and McDonald's was thriving, you had white kids that had their parents' nice automobiles and they would cruise through McDonald's, cruise through the movie theaters. Nobody bothered them. That wasn't a problem. But we had kids before Fisher Street became what it is today, hanging out on Fisher Street, hanging out at the Waffle House. So to me, what's the difference? You got kids hanging out. But the response for the city was to take the fire department and spray the kids. Now, not one faith leader, and that's why preachers ain't too high besides my pastor back there. I'm not too high on preachers. Not one person spoke up. And then I was criticized for speaking up. So that's why I don't have a whole lot of love for a whole lot of these bought and paid for black folk who's supposed to be our so-called leaders in this town either. But it just goes to show you the fight continues. So I appreciate everybody that came out, whether you were here to engage in the dialogue or you were here to run back and tell some shit to somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Right now we have an economic situation in North Carolina where we have about 30% African American, about 35% minority, but we only have about 10% of the businesses, minority businesses in North Carolina, so there's a big gap. So as long as there's a gap, there's going to be crime, there's going to be poverty, there's going to be issues that we have to address. So our best objective, intentional objective is to open our doors to entrepreneurship, to minority entrepreneurship. And it is in our best interest to open our doors to make sure our youth have the aptitude they need to pursue such ventures and to qualify for these jobs that are going overseas to the Japanese who do qualify. So I would say, can we leave understanding that it is a united effort. We have to overcome these Gadarene kind of perceptions and the man of Gadarene perceptions, and when a man walks through that door, look for the gifts that he has, because just as he said, it is, everything affects us all, and when there's a gap in our economy, it will always affect us all.
Thank you. My man, you be the last word.
Miss Peoples, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brenda. I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
I just want to piggyback on something that you said in that agency. We can do all we can do to instill values in other people's children or what have you, but that parental participation has to be present too. Because I think that, and I work in education for quite some time, and I find that a child's behavior mirrors that of the parent. So we can do all we can do publicly, but that household also has to change its mindset, and in order for their children to take advantage of everything that's offered to them and the opportunities.
And I agree 100%. 2 points. Black people do not have a monopoly on bad parenting.
Oh,
That is a perception out there. We do not have a monopoly on black parenting. And the family only takes shape within a social political system. See? It takes shape within a social political system. Oftentimes we tend to look at problems at the second and third link in a sequential chain of events. You see? We have to start with the basic premise that we are a dominated people. See? And until we can exonerate ourselves from domination, when these problems will persist over and over and over, and you call it for more sociologists, and the system benefits in this respect. On some level, they create the problems, but they get paid for offering remedial efforts for the problem. See? And thus the progenitor has an invisible hand. And we decontextualize problems and deal with symptoms as opposed to causes. It's like what Dr. King said when I was in the 7th grade. You know, true compassion is more than flinging a coin at a beggar. We have to restructure the edifice that produces the beggar. See? King talking. Nobody can rap like King. The whole Jericho Road, brother said, needs to be changed. Where men are fleeced and robbed as they journey along life's highway. You will not deal with greed and all of its concomitant issues until you deal with the socioeconomic structure. Okay, that produces greed. We're talking about unfettered capitalism, a society, a system that is built and predicated on scarcity. Capitalism, militarism, racism, economic exploitation are all intertwined. Wall Street, the movie, Go and Get Go, greed is good. The American ethic, to get money by any means necessary. The only difference between Letitia, Jamal, Ray, and Baker, they're using cruder methods than the Wall Street manipulators, but it's the same ethic. Not one has been prosecuted, you know, for stealing the amount of money that I gave you a visual of. Not one. In fact, given $25 million bonuses. There's something wrong with that.